Judd Hendricks, and I want to welcome you to Interfaith Paths to Peace. This is our Wednesday afternoon Boardroom Buddhas program, which has been one of our most exciting programs this summer. We are specifically talking about how do we raise consciousness in the corporate world. Interfaith Paths to Peace believes that cultivating inner awareness and consciousness is the first step in creating a more peaceful world. As we are more harmonious with ourselves, more awake and aware of what's going on in our world, we can be better peace and justice makers. So I'm really excited. Today's program is just going to be absolutely fabulous. We have a special guest coming to us all the way from Europe, and then three of my favorite people on the planet are also going to be here, and our normal co-host. So Ida, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for putting this together. You and Sarah are kind of the co-hosts of this, and so welcome everybody. If you're joining us on Facebook, you're welcome to add comments or questions as we get going, and you can put those in the comment section. If you're on Zoom, you're welcome to unmute yourself at the appropriate time and ask your question. You can also put in the chat box a question that you have, and we'll be putting up some information specifically for Nicholas today. We'll put up his email address, or not his email address, his webpage, and some other information. If you want to contact him or be engaged in some of the work that he's doing, we'll make that readily available for you all. So thanks for being with us today, and Ida, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
And welcome everybody. I'm Ida Turner, and with my co-host Sarah Waisky, we bring conversations every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I've got to add the word US now to that announcement, since we have Nicholas sitting in Italy calling in today, so he's got a crowd of folks out there that might be catching the show too. So Boardroom Buddhas, we going international. I love that. This is a space that we are cultivating to raise corporate consciousness, period. In every corner of corporate spaces, regardless of what your role is, it is important that we embody all of who we are and show up as such. And so these conversations are geared towards getting folks there. Sarah Waisky, my co-host, has been newly appointed as the president of NABO Kentucky. That's the National Association of Women Business Owners. So I wanted to take a minute and just say, deep bow to you, good job, congratulations. And I'm excited at the work that you're going to be doing for women in the business world. So say hi, and then I'll talk to our panelists in a sec.
Thank you so much, Ida, for recognizing that. And I'm really excited for this role. I'm working with an amazing group of women in this organization, and with various organizations and leaders throughout the city. So it's going to be great. I am so excited for this conversation. Nicholas, I was able to catch part of your dialogue with Dr. Michelle McMurray Heath. And that conversation, like I've only watched half of it, and there were so many valuable nuggets in there so far. I cannot wait to finish. So I am really excited to jump into this conversation. So thank you both for being here, David, as well.
Thanks, Sarah. So David Graffy and Nicholas both have their consultancy firms that's geared towards leadership development. I'm going to let them do it right and introduce themselves, and we're just going to kick off and dive in and get the conversation going. So welcome to you both. David, I'll let you take the mic.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Graffy, and I am a newly minted retiree. I retired about a year ago after 40 years in organizational life, mostly in for-profits, although I had a 3-year stint with a nonprofit. And I have a great deal of interest in human development, and specifically, you know, the spiritual domain, and how we as human beings can show up more loving, more receptive to each other, not just in the world, but in organizational life. I am a current instructor at Stegan Leadership Academy, which is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. And basically that leadership development program is very much focused on how do you cultivate consciousness with leaders. In their particular bent, a leader is somebody that's running a business. I have a different take on that, but that tends to be who shows up at the Stegan programs is 40, 30, a few older folks, roughly my age, that go through that program occasionally. And it really is to help leaders see that the quality of their character is really what matters, more so than what they actually do. It's what's coming through them and how they show up. So that is me. Nicholas, if you would say a few words.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Ida, Sarah, and Judd, for inviting me today. I'm excited to be here. I've been, since the age of 16, basically, I've been development, consciousness, potential has been the main focus of my life, without doubt. And the first 20 years of my career, I was in the theatre. Not really the normal theatre. I took theatre as, I guess you'd call it, a spiritual path. I was really fascinated to explore what happened when the actor, when their whole body, mind, heart opened. A bit like in the zone in sports, and what happened when they became totally embodied. So every word they spoke was completely felt. And that was really 20 years of incredible exploration and performance. I had my own theatre company. And then in the late 90s, a small group of us got invited to work at one of the UK's main business schools by a very visionary woman. And to cut a long story short, over 3 years, we developed a whole methodology. Interestingly, we used Shakespeare's stories. We realized we had this extraordinary gift. It started when we were the team that opened Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London with Henry V in 1997. And we started using the stories as these incredible mirrors. And we spent 3 years really developing this, and it became more and more successful. And we could see what an impact it was having. And we got more and more excited by it. So in 2001, we took a big jump and quit the theatre. As we like to say, we stopped working with narcissistic actors and started working with narcissistic leaders. And in a few years, we had amazing success. We were working all over the world. It was a very powerful methodology. And we would work with senior teams, quite often for 5 days. And the story would, anyway, there's extraordinary depth in Shakespeare. And the story really was a mirror. So it was like, this is what's happening in the story. Let's look at how this is happening in you. And it was a deep dive. And that continued for many years. And we had different plays for different themes. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I felt a need to leave. It was a big step to leave so I could go more in depth into the work I'm doing now, which initially I based entirely around presence. And that would be the time that I came to work with you, David, at ProLift, your senior management team. And, since then the work has really deepened. I work at 2 of the world's leading business schools. I coach CEOs and senior leaders one-to-one. And really, I think the work became more and more uncompromising, let's say, as I've grown more and more, and I see more and more, I understand more and more. It's a continual learning. I'm on a continual learning journey, and basically the work got stronger and deeper. And now this new phase, which began a year ago, it was like this archetype kind of dropped in, leader as healer. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I kind of listened and followed, talked about it hesitatingly at first, because it's not a normal idea, leader as healer. Mentioned it to one or two CEOs I was coaching, half expecting them to say, what? And found that they were actually like, wow, okay. And then I started to write a book, thinking that would be the natural expression of it. And I wrote a whole first draft by the time of the lockdown, actually. And during the lockdown, I kept sitting with going back to the chapters and just being stuck. You know what it's like when you're on a process, a creative write. And I was like, what's going on here? Why am I stuck? I mean, it's partly because I'm not a natural writer, I'm a communicator. But I was stuck. And then about 6 or 7 weeks ago, one of my dearest friends and colleagues, Professor Michael Watkins, who's authored a bestseller called The First 90 Days, a very well-known book, and professor of leadership at the IMD, he said, write an article. So I sat down and wrote an article. He really helped me. We did various drafts together. And that article suddenly, it was like that was the breakthrough with this project. And I've had an extraordinary response since then. I mean, the IMD suddenly sent a film crew to film me talking about it. I'm going to do a webinar for them. Then I had this idea for Coaches Rising, for whom I've done a lot. They said, what would you like to contribute to our new summit? And I suddenly, the idea came to me. That's how I work. And the idea came during a conversation with them. Maybe one of my clients would be willing to talk about the work we've done. And so I approached Michelle. We've worked 2 years together. It's been an extraordinary, in-depth journey. She recently became CEO of a very important organization in the US. And she agreed. And I wasn't sure how the dialogue would go. You know, it was unusual that a client would talk, and we were interviewed. And the first time I watched it back, I was like, wow, okay, I think this really captures something. And I knew then that the next step would be an online training. So I've already been doing training groups online. I know how to do it. So a few days ago, after a few weeks of preparation, I launched the online training, which I'm sending to different organizations and seeing what will happen. That's a short summary.
I think we should do this article thing, Nicholas. David, what do you think? Because David and I met each other not even 2 weeks ago through Jed, as this magic has been happening. And on a conversation with David, I was telling him about the vision of Buddhas, and David said, you know what? There's somebody I know that you should talk to. And he shared his article with us, your article with us, Nicholas. And I thought, wow, powerfully written. And you, just for our audiences, you can find that article on Nicholas's website. We've put it on our Facebook feed as well as here on this chat on Zoom. But that article is really what got everybody buzzing. So I'm going to let David jump in because I have my own list of questions. And of course, we welcome all kinds of questions on both Zoom and Facebook. So we want this as interactive as possible. Let's get to the meat of this thing that you do with this. Right. David, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So the first thing I want to do is put the car in reverse a little bit. Because what originally drew me to Nicholas was a work that I was doing within the organization I was leading. And I was trying to have not just my leadership team, which was myself and 3 other guys, but the whole senior management team, which was basically about 30 of us. So I was trying to cultivate a little bit more depth with that group of people, and realized I needed another voice. And I had heard about Nicholas, and the particular place where we crossed paths and really got my interest up is around a term that I was using, and I'm sure many others, and Nicholas was one of them, called leader presence or leadership presence. And that really had that really had a lot of weight with me, because it went back to, you can give me all kinds of toys to play with in an organizational life, different things to do, different skills and so on. But at the end of the day, an individual's ability to influence another one, I think, really goes back to who exactly is the leader? Like, what's the quality of this leader's presence, their character? What shines through whenever they're in the room or on a call or on a Zoom conference, or what is leadership presence, and how can it help create a different kind of organization, one that was healthier, one that was more inclusive of all the people that were contributing their time and their lives to the organization. And my attempt was to try to kind of break the mold and see if we couldn't construct a little bit different kind of an organization. So I had reached out to Nicholas around leadership presence, and he actually worked with our organization a couple different times, and I've been friends, and he's worked with me as well over the last 7 to 8 years. So I think what I'd first like to do is really start from that place around leadership presence. And Nicholas, if you wouldn't mind putting your voice in here, was precisely what is leadership presence, and why do you feel that it's critical or important dynamic in organizational life?
I think it's more than critical. I think it's the foundation of any healthy leadership. And I think to understand it, we need to understand more how much we've normalized what I call a culture of absence. Because we've so normalized it that we've forgotten that we're in it. Because 95% or more of the leaders I meet, whether it's one-to-one or in the business schools or in organizations, 95% or more are operating in such a way that they're totally dominated by rational thinking. That's their primary modality, and feeling and sensing are way, way in the background, hardly awake at all. That's not because of ill intention. That's what our culture cultivates. That is a culture of absence for the simple reason that our thinking, rational mind does not feel the world. That is not its purpose. And Einstein asked us the vital question, is our mind our master or our servant? If our mind is our master, as is the case in the culture of absence, we're in trouble because we don't feel the world. We have conversations, but we don't feel each other. And that got so normalized that we forgot, it's fascinating, we forgot that it's even abnormal. Like in one of the CEOs I coach, and there's a reference because there's a beautiful dialogue we recorded recently. I always remember, it's an African-American woman. After a few months, she just attended a very kind of senior leadership conference. And she was quite excited. She said, Nicholas, I realized I was in this whole meeting yesterday. I suddenly saw no one was really listening to anyone. She said, I remember, I'll never forget, she said, I saw people speak and I saw it didn't land. So that was like a wake up, because before that she didn't notice. And I believe that's the state of our world. So the way I see it now, and it's even more vivid, we have this horrible, horrible pandemic called COVID-19, but we're in a much bigger pandemic than that. And that's a pandemic of fragmentation and absence. And presence, therefore, means, as a kind of basic definition, it means I am here embodied, meaning I feel my body. I'm here connected to my emotions and my heart. I'm here as with my mind in full capacity, and I'm also here in a deeper part of myself, which I call being. And therefore, the basis of presence is I'm here and I'm available. I'm here and I'm available to listen to you. I'm available to feel what's going on here. I'm available for new ideas to come in.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't take an opportunity like right now to do what we're talking about, like just for 10, 15, 30 seconds.
Okay.
And wondering if you do a little improv, like, yeah, let's do it, not just talk about it.
Okay, so the most basic foundational practice is how we pay attention. And the first thing to realize is that paying attention has nothing to do with thinking, because they easily conflate. Paying attention is a faculty. Here's the easiest way to get this. David, and anyone who wants, take your hand and pinch the skin. Pinch the skin. Pinch it quite hard and just notice the sensations. It's a little bit painful. And in a moment, I'm going to say, let's pinch harder till it actually hurts a bit. And then we'll let go and let's just notice all the sensations that happen. So pinch harder, 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 let go. And just notice this whole texture. Also other parts of the body, subtle sensations. Just notice, just notice, just notice. Yeah. The amazing thing is that we know now through neuroscience that when we do that, even that 10, 20 seconds, our brainwave frequency changes measurably. It's a brilliant confluence of 5,000 years of meditation knowledge with brain science. That's the foundation, because if we're locked in rational thinking, we're locked in beta wave brain function, we're not fully here, we're not fully present. We're walking around in a kind of half asleep state. You see people talking to each other, but not feeling each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm aware in myself that listening to you and the rhythm and the cadence is like it's slowing. And I'm wondering if people listening right now, if they are also feeling that everything kind of just slowing down and settling.
Right. Well, this is really important. I mean, it's lovely that you say that, because when I'm working with a group or I'm working one-to-one, from the very, very beginning, I'm going to make very clear we have to slow down. Why? Because our thinking mind goes much faster than our feeling body and our sensing body. People talk, and it's that speed, and there's no connection with what's happening. So it's beautiful how you say we have to slow down, or that's why when you say to most adults, how are you feeling right now? Most adults can't tell you. Most adults have no idea what they're feeling. They'll start telling you what I'm thinking. Even the words will say, I feel, no, it's a thought. Until we slow down and pay attention to, first of all, our body, and then little by little we make friends with our emotional world, then our reality changes. And interestingly, we slow down in order to go faster. We slow down in order to then act with much more speed and precision. So we create this inner bowl of being, and all of our doing comes out of that. And it has a far greater accuracy, precision, and effectiveness. you'll hear Michelle say in the interview, eventually I persuaded her, take time to meditate every day. You'll have more time. And she was like, no, I've got a child. And of course, like normal. And then she said, he was right. And now she's a deep meditator. We have much more time when we coordinate our inner being, much more time. So we slow down in order to go faster and with much more clarity. The other beautiful principle now that I'm teaching a lot is something that actually I've studied with some amazing mentors, and one was a Zen meditation teacher a long time ago, and there were some pearls that he taught, and one of them has come back to me, and clients are finding it really useful. He said that at any moment in our life, we're either on a forward circle or a backward circle. And he said, if you're on a forward circle, get off it. Because a forward circle is up and out. That's what's happening everywhere, up and out of my body, lifting up. Backward circle is, I'm here, and I'm ready to receive you. I think when a leader cultivates that, everything changes, literally. Everything changes. And if a leader transmits that and creates the culture, as I think you saw a bit when we had those wonderful 2 or 3 day workshops with your senior team, the whole energy field changes. Everyone becomes more connected. That's the other vital word. Everyone becomes more connected. And of course, the emotional work is crucial. And maybe in a moment we'll talk about that. Because that's one of the biggest disconnections we have in the culture of absence. We disconnected from our emotional world. And then we invent all these ridiculous ideas about positive emotion and negative emotion. And it's weak to cry or feel fear, and leaders don't feel fear, and they never say they feel fear, let alone cry. What kind of, that really is finished. That's just a recipe for more and more disconnection. And we're in a very serious pandemic, way beyond COVID. And I believe we need to wake up. We need to wake up to the disconnection. And I find when I teach that most people get this. It's not difficult to understand it. And then comes the work of how do we connect? How do we connect? How do we connect? We're never going to solve the climate emergency from the consciousness of disconnection. Never. We'll just go on and on till we're over the cliff. Because we can't stop, we can't feel it. And if we can't feel, we can't care. That's the more serious problem. Not because we're bad, but just because our hearts are numb. Our hearts are numb. Many men, I believe, our hearts get very numbed. And that's why the emotional work is so important. As men, for instance, we need to cry more. We have to cry more because that melts our heart.
This keeps coming up, Nicholas, in terms of our conversations here on Boardroom Buddhas, where we talk about raising the effeminate wisdom in the workplace.
Right.
For both males and females, right?
Yeah.
It's that level of presence that every person, if they could bring all of who they are to the table in that sense, then I would guesstimate 80% of the issues will resolve in a natural way.
Right.
There's several questions here on our Zoom call and a couple on Facebook, I think. But I wanted to, I don't want to jump in front of David, but when I wanted to bring it back to the leadership role in an organization or a team. And for me, if I ask myself, what to me is an enlightened leader or somebody with presence, right? In my experiences of having had many leaders, the ones that stood out as such to me were the ones who represented the stewards of the vision for that organization, regardless what sector you fell in, right? So to be the steward of a vision would mean that I need to be fully embodied and plugged in and vested into that vision, and see myself as that steward to get my team leading in the right direction, right? So I mean, I could start out by just asking, let's say in an organization that's been around for 100+ years, right? The structure's almost, it's not almost, it forms the framework for the culture for all that time. So how does one go from that much legacy and implementing whatever you have to teach? What would that even look like in an organization that's been in that place for a long, long time? Especially when the measure of success has been equated with activity and busyness and hitting deadlines and due dates and bottom lines, right? So being in that space for all that time, what would be one of the first things you would bring into an organization in terms of that leadership development?
I just want to note in passing, and we'll be very happy to come back to it, because you said something so important before this question. You talked about the feminine, and it's a big theme for me, because I think at the core of the culture of absence is the disconnected hypermasculine consciousness. I'm not talking about man and woman, I'm talking about hypermasculine consciousness. So I have a lot to say about that if we want to come back to that. I mean, maybe this is good for David to say as well, because basically if I work with a team, as we did with ProLeft, it's a process of multi-level connection, starting often with the body. Let's actually start to feel our body. So typically, and I've done this with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of the most senior leaders even, I get a group lying down on the floor and guide them through a breathing process, really opening the breathing, really feeling the body, then feeling what it means to be grounded. It's very slow. It's very slow. People gradually get to their feet and they feel what it's like to be grounded. And that can take 30 or 40 minutes, but very often by the time we've done that, when people come back sitting in their chairs, it's amazing. It's like,
yeah.
the whole place has totally changed. That's very important, because then we can talk deeper. Once people have a felt experience, we can talk much deeper about what's the implication of that, and how come what you just feel now, how come that's totally exceptional? Why isn't that the way you feel all the time? Why have we accepted that that's an exception rather than the norm? That's a very important question. And then what do we need to do? What are I teach a lot of practices. How do we need to implement this? And it's hard work. This is not get enlightened in a weekend. This is work. This is work. Because then and then we'll do emotional work. This is a big one, because this is where there is, as I said before, I think in many ways, a huge disconnect. Huge disconnect. Now that in itself has many, the composition of that is many layered, but even if we take it at a simple level, and we say there are four primary human emotions: joy, fear, anger, and sadness. And none is more positive, none is more negative. We need to learn how to feel more, reconnect with our feeling. Because everyone is frightened. Everyone carries around fear. We need to be able to just say, you know, I feel fear. I feel fear when I look at this, when I look at this, or when I look at that news, I felt so sad. We need to loosen that up. So I have exercises for that. One of which is often overnight, I get everyone to write a poem, which really kind of shocks people at first. Homework, you're going to write a poem. And you're going to write a poem about something that really matters to you. You know, and we joke and it's fine. And then people go away and it's actually almost miraculous. People come back the next day, they go into small groups, and I give kind of rules about how to do it. And people hear each other's poems, and suddenly we're hearing the voice of the heart, the voice of the soul. And then we come back all together. And then again, if we've opened something through the physical world, we've opened a much bigger door once the emotional energy is open. Maybe, David, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I'm remembering very clearly, we did that exercise. You brought that to ProLift. And you used a word a second ago, like that. We can now have conversation. Like there's so much power in being vulnerable.
Right, exactly.
And you don't get vulnerable looking at spreadsheets and talking about business goals, and yet underneath it is, I don't know what to do here. I'm afraid this won't work. I need more help, and I'm not sure the team has enough trust. There's all kinds of things underneath it. But very often in organizational life, there's no systematized, structured way to have these kind of conversations. So going back, I think a little bit to Ida's question around, how do you take an organization that isn't just a startup, where you're creating culture, hopefully in a very conscious way, just out of the gate. So the structure of the culture is being intentionally crafted versus it's already in place. It's been in place at, ProLift by the time you came in for, 35 years. And how do you have conversations where people can see each other? I mean, can really stop and see each other. Not just, oh, that's Mary and she's married to Frank and we met Frank at the Christmas. No, there's Mary. Who is this human being in front of me? And what does she aspire for? Or what is she inspired by? What does she care about? And what I noticed in our last probably 5 years at ProLift, since you did some of your work with us, is the quality of the conversation was just changing. As you remember, Nicholas, we have a document that we read before every single team meeting. We call it Principles of Engagement. And that document, with all the history of the work that we've done, much of it with Nicholas, not all of it, really sets the conversational tone in a team meeting, where if somebody isn't achieving something that they committed to, that they can talk about, I started that and I don't know where to go from here. I need some help. And that's a vulnerable moment. I don't care whether you're female or male, to be sitting in front of your peers and saying, I don't know what to do here, or I'm confused, or I tried this and it failed. There's a vulnerability opportunity that is available, where now everybody can help, and not just help like give you another idea, but no, I'm with you in it. So when you talk about, feeling each other, to say, I don't know where we're going, and I'm afraid, and I need your help. I'm sitting here, I can feel how compelling that is as a human being to hear that. Like, if I heard that from somebody else, I mean, how does your internal sense not open up, and lean you forward? And that's where engagement really is, or where I saw it. I'm thinking about, and I'm not sure exactly where it was in the timing of that particular 2-day that you were referencing with the poem. I think that was our first gathering. And one of our sales manager from Indianapolis, he had the courage to look at the group and say, I don't know that I've ever listened to another human being before. Here's a sales manager who's listening to customers all the time. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a son. And for a man at 45 years old to look at his peer and say, oh my gosh, I don't think I have ever listened. He wasn't talking about these. You know, he was talking about this something else was able to listen. You know, something else was available to him. And these little moments of somebody having that insight and how it kind of cracks the cultural container, you know, whether Prolift it's 35 years or Ida, your example of 100 years, it's that cracks that container. And in a certain way, it's really difficult to go back because something marvelous opens up in its place.
Well, I think the place to start is in the now, right?
Exactly.
So if I look back on my career and all the leaders that stood out to me, who have become my mentors and guides and somebody I can call when I'm not sure about a business move I need to make in my next career, those folks are still very much a part in my network because those were the bosses or the leaders that would simply stop to say, how can I help? I appreciate you. That's it. Just those little things. What do you need? What have you got on your desk today or this week? Do you need help? What do you need? What can I do to help make it easier or faster? Where's your pain point? Those are the folks who took 5 seconds just to pop their head into my cubicle and go, Ida, you good? What's going on with you this week? And for me, that meant a big deal because it spoke, that's the embodiment we were all looking to find, regardless of whether you're in corporate America or in any other kind of group situation, is that presence we're talking to is just asking, where can I plug in? Right?
I have something. Go ahead. I have something about what David said.
Well, what's been coming up for me is this concept, and it's come up on Facebook as well, the wounded healer. And that's a term by Henry Nouwen that he came with, that the leader is the wounded healer, the one that can name and be present to their own wounding, experience the healing in that. And like David, your practice of this is so, I remember we hadn't known each other very long, and we met at P.F. Chang's. I remember exact moment. We were sitting there across from each other at this restaurant, and all of a sudden you just opened up, like you just became fully present. And we were talking about hard stuff. I mean, we weren't talking about work stuff. We were talking about, personal stuff. And I think we'd met one other time, and we both had this moment, and you teared up and I teared up. And here we are, these men that didn't know each other at P.F. Chang's, all of a sudden sharing this holy moment. I remember the booth. I remember the moment. And I thought, this guy, I want to be connected to him for the rest of my life. And so just the ability to do that. And I think if leaders can show their wounding, it was around both of our wounding, that gave permission then for the rest of our humanity to come on board, because we were able to name and be present to each other's wounding. But you started that. I mean, you went there first. And I think that's what it takes as a leader to go there first. Absolutely. And then other things open up around that. So I just want to share the wounded healer.
Beautiful, Judd. And I just wanted to say a couple of things, actually many things, but let's start with two. What I also remember, David, very clearly, because it's happened in other situations, but I remember one particular moment with your team where, at least on the second day, they'd been in small circles, and I think the topic was fear. It was like, let's talk to each other about what you're afraid of right now. And they did, because by that time it was open. But what I really remember is that when we came back into the whole group, as you say, about 30, many people said, what was incredible was that after we did that, so many new ideas came. And I think that's a really important point. And why is that? That's a very simple reason, that when we stop being in tension in order not to feel, because not to feel takes tension. And suddenly we're able to just say, as you said, Judd, this is what I'm feeling. The whole system relaxes. And only at that moment, only at those moments, is there a possibility of new ideas coming in, which feel like a download. If we're like that, we can never have a new idea. I said to one senior leader I coach, I said to him last week, if you go through a day and you've not had at least one moment where you've been inspired, moved, or excited or surprised, something's really wrong with your day. You're just operating on autopilot.
I agree.
And then the other thing I wanted to say to Ida, I mean, I'm still with your question about how this works, is that from the very beginning, I'm always teaching kind of meditation. There's a very beautiful metaphor in the Jewish tradition, the Jewish mystical tradition, which says that if you open the page of any book, you have all the black letters. But what we forget in the culture of absence is that there is a white page. And we need to train ourselves to be operating with the white page and the black letters. Because if we're only in the black letters, we're lost. We're lost.
It goes back to the same reading between the lines, right? It just brings that up to mind, is that there is the body involved. When people talk about body language, they might be saying one thing, but the body's showing something else or giving off a different vibe, right? It's the reading between the lines. So I love this metaphor of looking at a book and the black letters on the white page. We tend to not see the white page when the letters are so apparent to us.
Right.
But I also want to circle you back, Nicholas, on something we both touched on earlier in the conversation when Judd said we were talking hard stuff. And I wanted to say, no, you were talking hard stuff. And it's just language that men tend to have because they're so separated from that part of who they are also, right? The heart and the feeling and the emotion. So I get that it's a mind, body, and heart embodiment. And when we did the pinching exercise, it's to bring us back to the body. But there's this new trend, 2018, I read an article that was published in 2018 about the treadmill meetings in Washington, where they would put two treadmills together and two C-level suite folks would be talking and meeting and talking business, walking on this treadmill. So keeping the body engaged and present in the conversation is so key. So I wanted to hear from you in terms of two things: the feminine wisdom and how do we cultivate more of that in the workplace? And then secondly, one does not need to sit on a cushion for an hour a day. One could plug the body in, which most folks are already doing in terms of athletics. So we have to learn that.
But the problem is, and I think again, we need to really see it. If you go to a gym, basically what you see is people doing stuff to their body. That has nothing to do with embodiment. That actually continues to objectify the body. Whereas if you go to, let's say you go to a good yoga class or something like that, a good one, you come out of that and you go out onto the street, and at least for some time, minutes or maybe more, you're in a different reality. You're in a different reality because your body, the channels of your body have opened up. That's what's needed. Mm. So, one of the most basic practices that, and again, if you listen to the dialogue with Michelle, you'll hear her say that when we first met, she didn't realize, but she only processed the world from here. She had no access to the rest, and how it's transformative it's been for her to suddenly, or gradually rather, open that up. But in order to do that, and this takes, I think, what you were saying, Judd, a whole step further, we have to be willing to sit with, because part of our fragmentation is all the experiences we put aside that were too painful. We had to close them down. And it's like we learn to survive in a part of us that can go forward, can often be very successful, but there's a lot of our energy that's offline. And so when I work in depth, let's say in one-to-one work, we gradually make it safe enough to visit some of that offline energy. And that can be deep grief, it can be deep fear. In the case of women, I believe in the case of men, I said before, men often need to cry a lot more. There's a lot of suppressed grief in men. In women, it's my experience that there's a lot of suppressed rage.
Yeah.
And when we make a space where it's safe enough to say yes to that level of rage, which is both personal and collective,
Yes.
that's a huge. What happens then is that once that energy is allowed, and it's carefully kind of calibrated in a way, there's a deeper and deeper grounding. And it's amazing what happens, I've seen, when women are allowed to feel into their anger that has generational layers.
So how does an organization create spaces for that magic to happen, Nicholas?
Because we train people to be leaders as healers.
Mm.
A leader as healer is doing their own work and feels safe enough to open a space. Like, very simple, I think I said it in the article, I think one of the CEOs I coach is in charge of 70,000 people. He's also on the board of a household US firm. And he wrote me once, we're always on WhatsApp, he said, I had this incredible board meeting yesterday and we were talking, and I suddenly said to everyone, just a minute, how are we all feeling? That's because of our work. He would never have done that before. And he said, after that, the whole meeting became so much better. So it's both simple and not simple.
Yeah.
He could do that because we've done a lot of work where he got more comfortable with emotion.
Mm.
Because when a leader asks that, he or she, it has to be unconditional. People have to feel, yeah, he really wants to know. If I'm really angry and upset, he wants to know. He doesn't want me to just say what's nice. But, once a group or team, like in David's work with his management team, once that becomes more the norm, we're in a different territory. And then that spreads because, like you said, the leader comes to you and says, how are you doing, Ida? And you understand that he or she is not expecting you to just say, I'm fine. He or she actually wants to know. Then we're in a different culture.
Sarah, you had a question. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Actually, I had a few questions, but I wanted to play into Patrice's question as well that she had. In the dialogue that you had, you talked about you have to do the top-down work and the bottom-up work.
Yes.
And I can see where the top-down work would happen when you're doing the group trainings with leadership of different companies. But that bottom-up work is so much more personal. So how do we encourage that or promote that in corporate spaces? I know a lot of it would come from like one-on-one coaching, but how do we, and even just, seeking mental health professionals and encouraging that. It's always been a sign of weakness that we don't really need those things, but how do we encourage that in corporate culture to invest in one-on-one coaching with our leadership?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. And I think the basic answer is little step by little step. As we saw, with David's senior management team, that we go step by step. And it either at first takes someone like me or someone else who comes in and makes it safe enough. But then the leaders themselves start to become safe enough to do that. I mean, I've worked with organizations where they get to the point where they start every meeting, a senior team, by going around the table and everyone says how they're feeling genuinely. And it's understood, nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be analyzed. If you say, I'm really tired, I don't feel like being here, we just hear you. We just hear you. And things like that that gradually become embedded start to make a huge difference, because after that's happened, the level of presence is much greater. And we haven't had to go into big trauma. We haven't had to go into big drama. We've just learned to articulate what's actually happening. I'll say more about that in a moment. And miraculously, that person who said, I'm really tired, I really didn't want to come to this meeting, and is heard almost always 5 minutes later, they feel good. Fascinating. They feel good because they've been heard. This is so fundamental. This is listening, like David said, his salesman. We don't need to, the paradox is, often we don't need to heal or change or fix. We just need to hear and relate. That's the healing. That's the healing.
I would like you to say that again, Nicholas, because I think what you just said is really, really important.
Yeah, because we spend a huge amount of time trying to fix and change. And this is one of the deepest principles of all. Nothing changes while we're trying to change. Things only change when we meet what is. Now, that sounds simple, but it's huge. We meet what is. How are you? I'm tired. I don't want to be here. I really hear you. I feel you. Thank you for saying that. That is a very profound principle. We don't need to heal, fix, or change. We need to feel and make it safe enough to just feel what is. And we spend so much time, if we look, trying to be somewhere other than what is. And the other thing I wanted to say, Sarah, is that it's a very, very deep practice, which sounds simple. All of this sounds simple, but as we see when we practice it, it takes a lot of work. I call it reuniting word with energy, meaning we have to relearn how to articulate what I'm actually feeling. That's a huge thing. When people learn to do that, that's why I said when you ask most people, how are you feeling? Word goes off somewhere here. Here's the feeling, but word goes off around there. When we can practice together, and it really, really takes a lot of practice. Tell me how you're feeling. First, I need to look. Yeah, I am a little bit anxious right now, and I stay with that. I don't analyze it. I don't explain it. This is a discipline, because if you say, yeah, I feel anxious because, no, you're already gone. You're already gone. You've gone into analysis. No. We just stay with the feeling, and then it'll change. Feelings change when we stay with them. Suddenly you have an insight because you stayed with the energy. And this is a fundamental part of the work of leader as healer, is to correct how we constantly go away without even realizing it, because it's so ingrained in our culture. Like Michelle noticed, people talk, but no one really listens. Because anyway, the talking is already a disconnected talking. And when a team together learn to talk in a way that's connected, everything is already in a very different dimension.
Sounds like a very enriching experience both ways for the listener, as well as the person vocalizing and honoring where they act. And they feel sort of validated by having the space to be able to say, I am here. Maybe not the way you would like right now, but this is how it is.
And you know what it is, Ida? It's that suddenly there is intimacy. And that's an interesting word because we have all kinds of associations with that. But
So that in the boardroom, they will throw you out to HR.
in presence,
But I hear you.
because there's an intimacy with self and there's an intimacy with life in presence. I walk outside and I feel nature. That's the doorway to rapture. That's intimacy with life. You tell me how you are and I'm relating to you. I feel you. That's intimacy. Intimacy is not we all feel good. Intimacy is I feel you how you are and you feel me feeling you. That's intimacy.
Yeah, right on. Intuitively, like, yes.
I feel you and you feel me feeling you and I feel you feeling me. That's intimacy.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with anything else. It's what is.
Mm.
Sarah Teeple, did you want to ask your question? Thanks for being on.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Nicholas, I had a question that sort of in regards to the inverse of leader as healer, and that would be about healer as leader. I'm an Ayurvedic wellness counselor and a nutrition counselor and a yoga and meditation teacher. And I've been feeling called for quite a while to expand my offerings from my clinical practice, working with one-on-one clients, to a broader space, to organizations, to corporations, to these bigger spaces where healing is desperately needed, but often, there's not enough time or resources for it. So I wanted your opinion on that.
It's very interesting because what's always happening with me is that I'm hearing your content and I'm feeling you. And most of the time we just talk about content. First of all, I totally support that movement. And if it's okay for me to say something about how I feel you, is it okay for me to say something? Is that as you do that, you'll just need to do some inner work so that your base gets stronger. So that you can walk into those environments from a stronger base ground in yourself, because you have a strong base in your work. To go into those environments, you would need to just it's kind of like opening a new level of your power. I think it would be an amazing thing for you to do, because your gifts are so big, but they need to be totally grounded. So when you go into that world, nothing shakes you.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
There's some echoing of that concept, Sarah, that you brought, the healer as leader.
It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah,
Sarah.
people are echoing that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. I'll take that. That will really sit with me. Thank you.
And this is a space in particular that Sarah Waisky and myself really, where we truly resonated in the awakening of the sacred feminine, because it is happening. We're not making it happen. We don't want to create something in that space. It is happening. And to find, like Boardroom Buddhas, find the space where women can come and get the reminder of who they really are. Yes, I am this and this and this and this, and I do this, and I've got these skills, and I've got these passions. And now what? How do you embody all of that where it becomes unshakable? So if I say, what's your name? And you say, Sarah, you didn't have to think about it. There wasn't should I give them my middle name? Or, right? You arrive as here I am. I say to Jack this all the time. I'm Ida-ing. When he says, what are you doing? How are you? Oh, I'm just Ida-ing. Meaning I'm doing what Ida does by all the kinds of things that I'm involved in, right? So Sarah and I watch this space, other Sarah, is that we're going to create this space where women can understand and step into your power. It's just a bump. We'll bump you in there, push you off that cliff. But once you fall, you understand you're flying. And that's where you start soaring, right? And take it and compass it and make it yours. So anyway, that's my little soapbox plug for what's coming. But
right, absolutely. And maybe just a couple more things related to Sarah. Because I think we each need to also we need to ask ourselves a particular question and walk with it, maybe for years. And the question is, what is the work that is mine to do? And like in Sarah, I can feel you have such a deep call for that. That seems to me part of the work that is yours to do. That step you're talking about. It's beautiful. And what I said about that deeper level of your ground, that would be top down and bottom up work, meaning what I mean by that is I'm sure you do a lot already, but your meditation practice, your yoga practice. And then there would be some kind of emotional work that would just need to be presenced in order for there to be a deeper dropping. Our base is something we drop into, and often just between us and our base, there are emotional layers that we're not even aware of necessarily, that need to have the space to be felt. Sometimes that's anger, sometimes it's fear or grief or whatever. And then suddenly, because this is a visceral process, it's a visceral, embodiment work is visceral work. We use language, but only to touch on energy. And then the base just gets stronger and stronger. Anytime we integrate an emotion that's been pushed aside, our base gets stronger. We sit more deeply in ourselves.
Terry, do you want to, I appreciated your question around, you want to ask or make your comment around staying present when things seem hurtful to other people or when there's conflict? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a big question or idea maybe for this. But anyway, I was just thinking about how do we really shift change in our society, in the workplace and in our society, because also thinking of businesses as being very large people in a way that affect us and the quality of world that we live in. But sometimes businesses and people are saying things that are untrue or hurtful, and I don't want to keep turning from that, because turning from it isn't changing it. So how do we stick with that? How do we have a healthy, loving presence, grace, I would say, for people and organizations that aren't so easy to be with? Or do we just, or is that not our business? Do we just leave them and go feed the things that we care about? That's the kind of what I've been grappling with anyway. How much time do I spend on this? Do I just need to go feed something that's easier to tend to? I hope that made some sort of sense.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm always asking why we're asking questions, like what is the real composition of our question? But I'm also, it's like, I hear it as a very general question. Can you be more specific? Like, is there a specific situation?
Yes, I'm thinking specifically like right now with addressing racism in our society, and also just tons of misinformation about, like I still see people saying things like immigrants sneak into our country and they get food stamps. No, that's not even true. Do I keep trying to correct that misinformation? Do I spend a lot of energy trying to bump up against things, or just take my gifts and energy and go to the people and the places that are doing
what feels true and right to me. Of course, there's some arrogance in that statement that I'm the keeper of of truth. But anyway,
I'd like to piggyback on that question and maybe articulate it a different way, in going back to what you mentioned earlier, Nicholas, in terms of honoring what we are feeling in the moment. So what happens when, as a woman in a male-dominated environment, that rage does show up within me, whether it's through something silly that was done in the kitchen or work-related events, somebody makes an offensive remark. So that feeling comes up, and if I have the vigilance and the presence to recognize it, what do I do with it is, I guess, what Terry's asking. So how do I honor that feeling without causing more damage or more hurt or more drama?
I mean, I think that's actually a different question, but it's a very good,
okay.
it's a very good question. I was about to say something else for Terry, but that question is very important. I mean, that's one of the reasons senior leaders need someone like me, a coach, where they, like, I'm still working every week with somebody like Michelle and a few other CEOs, because in our meeting, she will process that. We will make a space for her or whoever else I'm working with to feel the full rage. And then it's like in the rehearsal room, you know, in the theater, we would always say that in the rehearsal room, you go to 100% with your emotion. You let it out fully. And then you're confident in the performance that it's not going to explode because you've been there. So, but also once it's really processed deeply in a private setting, it sits differently. There's been a whole alchemy that's occurred. And it's a very important question as well, because angry women get very easily categorized. I think this has, and we could talk a lot about this because it's a very important point you're making, that the anger needs to have a place to be felt in its full intensity so that it doesn't spill out inappropriately or in a way that ultimately doesn't serve, that it's transformed into force and power. So because it's too easy to get categorized as an angry woman, let alone an angry Black woman. As I've understood, that's one of the biggest taboos in American culture. So we've worked a lot with that. Because once it's processed enough, it then sits more as power and psyche.
I didn't mean to take away from Terry's question. I thought that's where we were going, but...
Right. No, I mean, if we want to go back to Terry for a moment, where's Terry? Can you say something, Terry, so I get you big screen?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good. There you go. Because if I was coaching you, for instance, I would, this is I'm not suggesting we do it now, but I would say, Terry, let's be with the fact that you don't know. Let's see what happens when we say yes. Yeah, let's really include and honor that you're not sure. Let's take time with that. It'd be much more important. Yeah, you see something already happening. That would be much more important than me trying to give you an answer. Because there isn't an answer. Most questions don't have an answer. They have a process. This is a very important point. And if we can be with the process, something happens in the whole setup within you. So the first thing is be with the process, which is you have this question that you find yourself not knowing what's the right way to go with that. And it's lovely what happens when we do that. And when you allow yourself just to stop looking for the answer, but first be with how it sits in you to have this question. What happens inside you now? Describe.
Yeah, I think that sitting with the question also helps me let it go in a way. Even if I don't come up with an answer, it helps me let go of the conflict and the energy so that I can then be grace, the capital G grace, which is the solution, I believe, to so many things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because there isn't a linear answer to that question. The question sounds linear, but it's not a linear one. That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah. Mm.
Whew, this is beautiful, very rich. Judd made a suggestion in our chat. We've got a few minutes left. We would like to end with a checkout from everybody. And then have Nicholas, if that's okay, just take us through a few minutes of quietness, stillness, and groundedness.
Lovely.
And we'll take it to its end from there. So, Sarah Teeple, would you like to share with us a nugget of wisdom or two that has jumped out at you during this discussion?
Well, absolutely. As I voiced my question to the group, and then with Nicholas's response, it's interesting. It always comes back to personal work, often. So that I wasn't necessarily expecting that to be part of the response, and the fact that that was the most of the response, was just very interesting. And there's a lot of internal work that we all have to do, and that's kind of what these meetings of the minds are about. I really liked one other kind of nugget that Nicholas said today that reminds me of a Pema Chodron talk that I was listening to actually just this morning. Was the advice or the instruction when things come up for you to stay with the energy or stay with the feeling, but don't go into that story. We're so caught up with the content. So for me, that I have my own personal examples of that come up with, or, that are associated with kind of my personal work. And so we all do. So just interesting to connect those two together. And also I just wanted to say it's really inspiring to share this Boardroom Buddhas time with just some very empowered and wise people. It makes me excited to continue my work and to have people to glean wisdom from is very helpful and inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Terry, would you like to share with us?
Check out with loving myself and standing in grace as a tool for development.
Patrice, do you have something to offer?
Where I'm at, which is, this was a very timely and needed reminder to me, who by nature is a very impatient, crusading kind of person for lots of reasons, that my best place is to wait, to listen and to wait within and without, and trust. There's a huge amount of trust that comes in that something will emerge or unfold that will direct the next step. So thank you for highlighting all of those truths.
Thank you. Sarah, you have parting words?
This was an amazing conversation. I just can't even explain how powerful everything you said, especially when we all took those pauses just to listen and to hear again what you said. David, when you made us, when you made Nicholas repeat that statement so that we all heard it, because I think the first time it just completely went by me, but when you made him repeat it, so powerful. So thank you for doing that. I think what I've taken away is, to be a strong leader, to be a healer as a leader, that we first have to know who we are and what our purpose is on this earth. And that takes a lot of work. It takes that both, that top down, that bottom up work. So that is just so important that we have to do. And I also love the idea that you talked about ideas. Ideas don't start in our minds. They start when we get out of our minds, and that they come from a higher place. And that when we're open to that, when we're present with others, especially when we're, around colleagues and we're trying to be creative and get these ideas, that we just have to let it go and to get present. And that's when we get inspired and get creative. So thank you again to you both for being here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Excellent. I'll say something, and then David, I'll let you close us off in terms of your experience and takeaways and what you brought to the table. This is so amazing. Thank you so much for introducing Nicholas to us. And then Judd will close us out after Nicholas. But David, go ahead. You share with us.
Yeah, I'm always struck that how easy it is to connect when there's just a moment of seeing and accepting the other person and ourselves right where we are. There's just something, it's like that's almost like how, when Nicholas talked about the letters and the white page, it's like that gives me access to the white page in a way. It just calms all the thinking, and the energy just moves, and it's like, and then I'm just there. I'm just there. It's like it's a magic moment to accept myself, the emotions that I'm feeling in the moment, or my spouse, or my friend Judd, just where they are. It's the profound moments. And I love the word grace, Terry. I'm glad you brought that in. That's a wonderful way to provide. It feels like grace to me, And maybe just a parting comment around feeling. And a friend of mine said this to me the other day. He said, feel first and then speak. Feel first. And only then are you free to speak. And I just felt so much resonance and power with that, and an enticement to say, yes, David, and you do need to feel first. So thank you all for being here, and Nicholas, of course, for agreeing to be here.
All right, Nicholas, you have the stage one last time. Let me just, I will save all my gratitude for my little takeaway, but I wanted to give you the floor just to sort of hold the space for us. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to not just thank everyone, but I really want to honor the kind of energy that's here of real deep commitment and inquiry. And I would love us to remember how important mutuality is. That we need to have these circles of deep inquiry and deep presence. And it's really beautiful to feel you all in that. So I'm very grateful for that. Maybe we just close our eyes and take a little moment. First of all, just to feel into your body. Just to listen, notice your breathing. Notice your contact with your chair. Just for a moment, just feel the in-breath and the out-breath, just as they are. And just to allow the ripples of different subjects we've talked about, just to allow them to settle and sit in your body. And to remember that our body is one of the deepest places of home in our existence. And every time we leave our body, we leave ourselves. Keep backward circling. Backward circling, I come back and down, back into my body. Backward circle. When I notice in my everyday life I've come out of that, I can, without anyone noticing, take a deep breath inside, withdraw my attention for a moment, bring my attention back into my body. Feel my feet, feel my legs. I'm here, I'm here. Ready, available. Great, thank you.
That was so yummy. And I hope all of you take this feeling into the rest of your day with you. It was so fantastic to share some space and time with all of you. So thank you for sharing you with us. Nicholas, David, thank you again. I have a feeling that we'll be calling on both of you again very soon. There's work to be done. And like somebody said on a call yesterday, we are the torch bearers. So we need to keep each other fired up and keep going and keep showing up. So deep gratitude to you both. I'm going to switch it up and have Judd do closing remarks, but I just wanted to add a reminder to everybody that next week, Wednesday, on Boardroom Buddhas, we're going to have, listen to this, you're going to love it, Nicholas. The title is, Can Lawyers Be Healers? We love it when we bring two ends of the same stick into the same place, because we get the raised eyebrow usually, which is exactly what we're hoping to make happen, is cause the stir of curiosity. And let's go find out. So we have two amazing attorneys, defense attorneys joining us. Judd, would you mind throwing up the flyer real quick to share it with folks on the screen? So July 22nd, back to our usual time slot, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time. So come out and join us. Tom Williams will be talking to Jean, who is based out in, Jean Bishop, who's based out in Chicago. So she'll be calling in from there. She's got an amazing story. Lost a family member to murder, and she speaks to how, as an attorney, a defense attorney, what that journey was like for her, and what that birthed in terms of the unfolding of her path. Tom wrote a very cool article called Can Lawyers Be Healers? And he'll be sharing a little bit more on that with us too next week. So I'll stop there. You're all welcome to come back. Sarah Teeples, I have not forgotten you. I'm punching my number in there so you can have it before we shut down. And Judd, I'll leave it to you to close us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. And just a deep bow to all of you. How do we change? We used to say, how do you change the world? And we would say one room at a time. And now we say one Zoom at a time. So, and a lot of that has to do with how we show up and just be fully present. And Nicholas, I had on Monday, we were doing a guided imagination, and I went to this place in the woods, and this huge bear kind of surrounded me and kind of overlapped me like a big bear hug. And his heart was huge, and my heart and his heart kind of melded, or that was the gift he was giving me, was the heart of a bear. And you have been a symbol of the heart of the bear for us, to take the courage to to allow us to drop into these big hearts. And I'm deeply grateful for the work that you're doing, and deeply grateful for the resonance on this call today. And may that echo out through our city and through our world. May we all have courage to be healers with big hearts. So deep bow to all of you.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we have our devotional on poetry. We're doing Lectio Divina with poetry of protest. And so join us at 9 o'clock. And then tomorrow afternoon, we've got a Lou Lab on becoming the beloved community, Dr. King's vision. What would it look like if Louisville embodied King's vision of a beloved community? So we're going to do some imagining of what would a just and thriving Louisville look like. And we'll do some guided imagery to see what images come up for us around that. So join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody. Blessings. Those of you that have joined us on Facebook, thank you for being with us. And you're welcome to unmute and say your words of blessings and sending to one another. Thank you.
Yes, to everyone.
Blessings. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Blessings. Thanks.
Patrice, good to have you on. Thanks for being here. Deep gratitude.